Bonsoir et merci de vous joindre à nous.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special event. My name is Caroline Dromaguet, and I am the interim president and CEO of the Canadian Museum of History and the Canadian War Museum.
Evening with Jamie Black as we celebrate Women's History Month. The museum is so pleased to have this extraordinary artist with us tonight. Avant de poursuivre,
Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge that the Museum of History, where I'm standing, is located in Gatineau, Quebec, at the meeting place of Three Rivers on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe.
where we are and working closely with Indigenous communities and partners across Canada is vitally important to the museum as we move forward together in a spirit of collaboration and respect. La conversation de ce soir fait partie
Tonight's conversation is part of our ongoing An Evening With series of virtual events. Each of these evenings provides us with an opportunity to engage in open and unscripted dialogue with experts and thinkers in fields such as history, politics, media, and the arts.
Our featured guest this evening, Jamie Black, is a multidisciplinary artist of Anishinaabe and Finnish descent, who grounds her work in an understanding of the body and the land as sources of cultural and spiritual knowledge.
Women's History Month in Canada is a time when we celebrate women's diverse contribution and achievements.
This is a time for celebration. We must also take a moment to reflect upon the prejudice, violence, and other challenges still faced by many women in Canadian society, especially Indigenous women. This includes the devastating numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, both past and present. Jamie Black's art practice speaks directly to their stories. L'une des œuvres les plus
One of the artist's best-known work is the Red Dress Project, featuring dozens of red dresses hung in public spaces. This striking installation evokes the lives and death of more than 1,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women.
decade, the Red Dress Project has become virtually iconic, with numerous presentations across Canada, as well as at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. La discussion
Moderating today's talk is the Museum of History's emerging curator of Indigenous art, Sylvia Drever, Nahea, and member of the Mistawasis First Nation in Saskatchewan.
numerous arts organizations and the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, Sylvia has mentored and supported Indigenous artists. She is passionate and committed to Indigenous research methods and actively looks for ways to integrate these methodologies into museum practices.
It is more important than ever to listen, share, and learn. It is also important to create spaces for the exchange of ideas within a spirit of reconciliation and moving forward together. Thank you all for joining us today.
Good evening. It is a great pleasure for me to be hosting tonight's event, An Evening with Jamie Black. My name is Sylvia Drever, and I'm the emerging curator of Indigenous art here at the Canadian Museum of History. Before we get started, just one little side note. If you are interested in asking Jamie a question, there's a raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit your question there. And at the end of our conversation, we'll have time to answer some of your questions tonight. I'm thrilled to be able to spend the next hour with my friend and colleague, Jamie Black. Most of you know Jamie Black from the Red Dress Project, or otherwise known as the Redress Project. But however, her practice encompasses so much more. So welcome, Jamie, to tonight's event. So starting with the Red Dress Project, can you tell us a little bit more about the origin of that project?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's really exciting we get to be together, even though I can't actually see any of you. But I'm very excited to be speaking tonight with Sylvia as well, where we've done a lot of work in the arts together, and I think we really share the same values and goals and kind of bringing forward Indigenous voices in the work that we do. And so thank you, Sylvia, for being here by my side doing this work. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that, but also I guess we'll begin with thinking about the Red Dress Project, and we'll just like pull up some images of the work. I have a slideshow of a lot of my works here for you guys to take a look at, so you get a better sense of what we're speaking through. hopefully that comes up at some point. Yeah, so I guess I'll begin by speaking about the Red Dress Project. So I started the project in 2009. And I gathered just on my own about 6 red dresses, and I was just installing them outdoors and thinking about the violence Indigenous women face both in our city and I'm from the Winnipeg area. And you hear stories around here of the violence women face every single day. And, you know, I have family members and people in my family, not that have gone missing, but that have endured violence as well. And so it's really close to my heart. And so I wanted to find a way that we could have our voices heard, you know, not through the news media, not through any, you know, kind of, not through that sort of space, but really in the here and now, in public spaces, and just be able to speak out and share our stories and come together and create awareness around what we're going through and what so many women have gone through before us, and really hoping to create change and make change around that. And I feel like the first step towards that change is raising awareness and pulling the truth out from under the rug. So that was really my goal with the work. And it's just, I mean, it grew beyond anything I ever could have imagined. And I feel like almost as though that I became kind of a vehicle, or I was given this work to take care of and to be responsible for, and to kind of bring it to the people, but also everyone that I've worked with have also been instrumental in creating growth in this project and allowing it to grow beyond what I myself as an individual can do. So it's been extremely amazing journey to be on.
Yeah, and I feel like, of course, the work, as you know, carries such a great responsibility. And, you know, that brings me to my next question, because when you think about the Red Dress Project or the Redress Project, I mean, it's very much community driven. So can you tell me about how your practice involves community, because it is very much community based?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's important for us to work together in groups and look at kind of what we're going through and be able to have a voice in the here and now, as I was saying. And I feel like public art is really a way to make that happen. Working in galleries and other settings, that kind of requires more red tape, and it requires more, you know, like formal education, things like that. And so I think just doing things on the ground with the grassroots is super important to, you know, allowing these ideas to have space outside of those institutions. And then also what's happened is it spent a long time being a kind of grassroots project, and it still is, but it also has space now in these institutions and is reclaiming space in those institutions. So yeah, and I feel like that's it. The reason why it grew so big was because I was able to share it with the community. And the community really, I opened it up about probably like 7 years ago now, and asked the community to, just all people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to put up a red dress if they support families and support kind of creating safer spaces for Indigenous women. And people all across Canada did that. And so, you know, there's installations going up that I don't even know about happening kind of all over the place right now, which is really beautiful. And I think it's like, I was afraid of sharing that and sharing the idea because I was afraid that people would not take good care of it. But people have so far taken very good care of it, and they've really used this work in their own communities to have their own voices heard in relationship to issues they're going through in their own spaces. And it's grown way bigger than it could have with just myself doing it. So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting when I was at my time at the Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, of course, you have an exhibit there that's a permanent exhibit of the red dresses. And I know in my time there, I would answer questions from guests. And of course, October 1st is a National Day of Action for missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. And, you know, people were asked to put a red dress somewhere public, outside their home, on a tree. And, you know, when I had some of these conversations, I had people talking about that they lived in a very urban or very suburban area. And, you know, one particular woman who was an older lady stating that she had put a red dress outside her house. And of course, it drew attention. Why is this red dress there? And people were asking, you know, she got the dialogue going. And so that was really, really great.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, like, yeah, I've traveled in many different places and you know, completely desolate places where there weren't a lot of people, and run into red dresses in almost every part of Canada. And the work has really started traveling beyond to the United States and all over Turtle Island, as well as kind of traveling in Europe as well. So people have really taken up, you know, this symbol as a way of showing solidarity with Indigenous women and girls. And I think there's something extremely powerful in that.
That's amazing. Well, we'll just go into that next photograph here, because I really would like to talk about our time together in Banff, of course. So we can just skip to the next photograph. Maybe the next one after that. Okay, so maybe the pictures are not all in order here. But during our time, of course, in 2019, we got to work together, which was a big honor for me, of course. The photograph is called They Tried to Bury Us, which I think is such a poignant statement to make in regards to our women and our land. And I'd like you, if you could just speak a little bit to that, your connection to land and how land connects to you in your practice.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just gonna, could we put this slide to the image with my body on the ground with the sticks on it? Thanks for your patience, everybody. So this is the image Sylvia was just speaking about. And I took this image in probably 2017 while I was traveling in Banff, and I was working together with another artist. We were just friends, but we were kind of going out, and I was thinking about that saying, they tried to bury us, but we were seeds, but they didn't know we were seeds. And I was thinking about that in the context of being a Métis Indigenous woman, and how, you know, our identities, they're trying to bury our identities, they're trying to bury our culture, our language, our, and as well as women, carriers of culture and language, they're trying to literally bury us as women because we carry that knowledge. And so I was just kind of meditating on the idea of reconnecting with the land, and how, you know, that is really what gives us back our power, and this kind of transformation. It's like of a death to a rebirth, and coming up as seeds, and coming up out of the ground and growing something new from all of the violence and all of the darkness that we've gone through to get where we are today. And really about like the new generation kind of coming forward and taking that knowledge and growing with it in a way that previous generations maybe couldn't. And I see that happening all over Turtle Island all the time, and it's really powerful. And the new generation is definitely, you know, being more vocal than, you know, our parents were allowed to be, than our grandparents were allowed to be. And, you know, I feel like they're making space and kind of growing something new. And so this image is, it's dark, but it's really, I think every end is also a beginning, and the kind of, that is true, you know, in the natural world and on the land. And we learn things and we transform and we become something new. And I was thinking about that as I was kind of making this work.
Yeah, it was a really great time together. I think that was your first time at the BAM Center, correct?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
I've
and
never
it's
been
such
there officially.
yeah, and it's such, of course, a place for so many artists to go and to be, and of course, to be in the mountains, I think is also an inspiring place, of course, as we call them, our grandfathers, to be in, you know, with our artistic practice. So it was really great for us to be able to just meet and to continue our work together there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the land, you know, all the land that we're on has a history, right? And I think that's really what, you know, I've sort of like moved towards in my practice, is creating this connection between the body and the land. And so, you know, we are being disappeared, but what happens when we are present? And we are present. We're present right here, right now, having this conversation, right? And the work with the red dresses, we're gathering because of the disappeared, but we are also present, and we have power in that presence, right? And so I kind of move towards like what doing this land-based work is really about reclaiming that power and that presence and embodying you know, identity and culture and spirituality and all of that stuff. And so it's the body and the land, and that connection is what brings our kind of our power back. And it's kind of reading the land and reading the histories of that land and connecting to that.
Of course, I mean, for myself, coming from Winnipeg, Treaty 1 area territory, you know, the news of Tina Fontaine and the death of Tina Fontaine made such an impact on myself as well as our whole city. I mean, it really sparked a movement. And for me, as an Indigenous woman living in Treaty 1 in Winnipeg, it made me feel like, you know, we were disposable, that, you know, you can kill us and literally get away with it. How did that news impact your work as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific what happens here in this city, and just like under everybody's noses. And if you're not the target of that violence, you hardly even hear about it. And I think that's what's so jarring for people when they finally hear about things. They, you know, it's too late and things keep happening. And, you know, Indigenous women are, I believe Indigenous women are targeted. And I really believe that since the onset of colonization, Indigenous women have been silenced, targeted, and endured huge violence at the hands of settlers, right? And so I feel like that relationship lives on now. And there's no, you know, there's no accountability. There's no, like, no justice systems are actually holding the perpetrators of this violence accountable. So, you know, something needs to be, I mean, what can we do, right? And I think that we're all working in our own ways, in our own spaces, to try to make change in those places and make safer spaces. But we are working against a 200-year history of trying to erase us. And it goes on now. It's not over. It's still happening. And so, I mean, I don't say that to, you know, dishearten us, but I say that because I think it's dangerous to say, you know, racism is over, or, you know, these things are over, and because they're very much entrenched in our, you know, societies and cultures here in Canada. So, you know, this is something we just need to continue working in the ways that we can to try to make change there.
Now, because as we were talking about land-based art, I mean, you don't shy away from any part of land. I mean, I recall a really beautiful and very haunting, in some ways, piece that you did on the Red River with the ice and the snow. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wish. I'm too bad I didn't have that image, because of course you made me think of that when you were talking about Tina. And I actually did a performance that was. I walked on the frozen river where she was found, and up to her memorial. And there were people for an art-based thing, kind of watching that, and I put tobacco down at her memorial. And so I've been to that space where she's been found, like, quite a lot. And so I guess like, yeah, so one winter I was like living near the river, like close to where she was found, and I created snow sculptures of women on the river, like laying on the river. And I was thinking about how many women are found in our river system here, and it's horrific. And so I mean, I just started, I didn't even do that for any particular project. It's just, I was just walking on the river and I just needed to do it. And so I did it. And yeah, and it ended up being kind of picked up, and the story was told a little bit further than just myself doing it. But yeah, it's just, again, like a reminder of, you know, this isn't just a winter wonderland by the Forks where we all, you know, go skating in the winter, which we also do. But like, this land is the meeting place of, from 10,000 years ago, you know, in this area in Manitoba at the Forks where Tina was found. This is the meeting place of Indigenous groups from all across Turtle Island for thousands and thousands of years. And there's, you know, there's pottery shards and bones, and there's a history there in that land that's really, really powerful. And so being on that land is powerful, and, you know, it's important that we draw attention to what's happening to Indigenous women, and that Indigenous women are being targeted, and bring back kind of the teachings and the culture that are in that land and the history that lives in that land, and bring that back again so that Indigenous women can be safe.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of performance art, I mean, you have definitely had a share of performances, and in fact, that's how we met, I believe. I think it was 2016 that you asked me to be a part of one of your performances during Culture Days. So that's where we met, and you know, that's been a big part of your practice. Can you speak to, and you've done some amazing endurance performance pieces as well. Could you speak to some of those works?
Yeah. Oh, were you in the oil and water one?
That was the one, yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I loved that, actually. It was really nice. Thank you for being part of it. But yeah, so that was at an art center here in Winnipeg. And so basically what I did was I had probably about, again, I wish I had images so you guys listening and watching could see, but so what I did in the gallery space is I put down cardboard. As when you're at camp and on the land, you often put down cardboard to cut up stuff. So if you're cutting up meat or cutting up whatever, you put down cardboard first, and that becomes the table. So I was kind of thinking about that, being out on the land and doing that kind of thing. And so I put the cardboard down, and then I amassed like hundreds of dishes, plates, cups, spoons, whatever, all kinds, if you can imagine, like a pile in the middle of the gallery. And then I had black oil, and I covered all the dishes with black oil. And I was thinking about, you know, how us as Indigenous communities are left with the mess and the cleanup of these large scale resource extraction projects and all kind of the harm that's being done to the land. And it's like, it's the water in First Nations communities that is being poisoned. It's not the water in cities. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not, you know, the grandmothers are cleaning up the oil, basically, is what I was kind of getting at with that performance. And so what we did after we had these dishes covered in oil is us four women, and Sylvia was one of them. We each were the Four Directions color, and we came in carrying water, and we sat all four around the four corners of the dishes on the floor, and we began to wash them. And so it turned into a really beautiful sort of community feeling doing that too, is that it really created this camp feeling, and it broke kind of it broke the sort of professionalism of the gallery setting and turned it into like being at camp and dishes need to be washed. And like, you know, people were standing all around looking serious, like an art serious, you know, whatever. And I was like, we need help with the dishes. And I just remember all these fancy looking people, we all sat in a circle and we just like, you know, one washed, one dried. And we, you know, we did this work together. And I mean, yeah, it's really beautiful to think of that because, you know, we do need to do this work together, and it shouldn't be just us Indigenous women or Indigenous communities cleaning up after these things. Is that we need to, you know, we need to stop this stuff before it even happens, but we need to do it together. And so, yeah, that was a really powerful performance. I kind of forgot about it.
Another one that I'm really thinking about is, of course, your endurance piece for the exhibition at Gallery 1C03 at the University of Winnipeg for the Shards exhibition, where you were in a little cubicle, a glass or a plastic cubicle for quite some time, I recall. Yeah.
Funny story that. Yeah, I was. So context for that exhibition was four women artists, Indigenous women artists, were invited to sort of interact with and learn from the pottery shards that were actually found from this area in Manitoba. So weeks before kind of leading up to the show, we got the chance to kind of go into the museums to like touch and look at these pottery shards. Casey Adams was part of that show, and she learned actually how to recreate pottery vessels based on how our Anishinaabe ancestors would have made, or Cree, not sure exactly, maybe both, would have made them in this area. And so we had like sort of that context and that learning and that kind of connecting to this work directly with the land of like building pottery that often women did in communities thousands of years ago. And so it was just like such powerful knowledge to be sort of almost gifted through this process. And Jenny Western was the curator for that. And I think she was the brainchild for coming up with this beautiful idea of like having us interact with those items instead of them only being in a museum context. So yeah, it felt like a very strong turning point, actually, just kind of reconnecting with that knowledge. It meant a lot to me, and I know the other artists as well. So for the performance that I did, I was working with Casey Adams, and I often do my performances like off the cuff, like, as you know, because I pulled you into that performance the day it was happening, and I was like, hey, can you do some dishes with me? And so I'm always making people uncomfortable. So, yeah, but anyway, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do for that one, but, you know, as we were walking into the space, I saw all the, you know, 8,000 to 10,000 year old pots in the, what do you call those things? Those, like, are they plinths? No. The glass cases, basically.
Yeah,
they were
glass cases. Yeah.
So it's just like how you would see in a museum, a glass case with an artifact or something in it. And I saw that and I immediately felt like what that pot might feel like stuck in there. And I was like, oh, that feels so awful. Like, it feels like it's kind of like creating this disconnection between ourselves, and these objects are meant to be used. They're actually not meant to be preserved forever. Like, no Anishinaabe woman made a pot for it to be preserved forever perfectly and no one ever touch it. Like, that never happened. So they're meant, they have a spirit and they have an energy and they're meant for us to be in relationship with those objects and those items. They're not for display. And so, I don't know, we need to rethink ways of how we can, and this is an example of kind of how we did that. But anyways, I'm going on and on, but yeah, so I saw those pots in there and I thought, I need to be in also a glass case because it just illustrated the absurdity of putting a culture in a glass case like that. And this is also like, this is not new either. Like, I believe Rebecca Belmore did a performance similar to this in front of a museum. I'm not sure when, maybe, I don't know exactly when, but other artists and other Indigenous artists have done work like this before where, you know, they're just drawing attention to the fact that Indigenous art and artists are kind of put on display and not interacted with in a real or taken seriously in a real way,
Mhm.
or as living, breathing, in the present
Mhm.
beings, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I went in that glass case, and I actually I didn't really plan it, Sylvia. So I was in there, like, I didn't realize, I didn't realize how little air is inside those things, which is none apparently. So I kept having to like open the bottom of it, and I didn't realize I would have to be sitting there for so long, but I was. And then Casey came and she started singing a Anishinaabe song about, I think about like making vessels. Like that was the song that she learned specific to the work that she was doing.
Mhm.
And she sang that song, and as she did, she came to me and she lifted me out of, she lifted that glass case off of me and allowed me to come out of it. And then we kind of like embraced each other, and it was like this reconnection and this kind of getting out of this disconnection. So it was really powerful. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums that up. I'd probably take up the whole hour talking about that one.
Yeah, it just came to mind because I thought of also, of course, the James Luna piece, the artifact piece where he laid himself in one of those same plinths with the glass on top of it, and also take a picture with a real Indian where he stood outside the Smithsonian as well, and he was dressed in his jeans or regalia or just a loincloth. So a lot of humor as well that he used in his work, but I thought about that as well with that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it just like really brings home how much work needs to be done in rethinking how we engage with culture and other cultures and between cultures and all of that, because I think it's important for people to learn about, our kind of traditional knowledges, our making technique, all of that stuff's really important knowledge. But it's just like, in what way are we telling this story, and who is telling this story, I think is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't, I mean, all of us from the Indigenous side are thinking about like, who is telling the story? Why is someone else telling our story? That's often the question, right? So I think it's really about bringing more Indigenous voices into these spaces, and repatriating remains where that's something that can happen. And there's just lots of different ways that I see kind of a movement towards in sort of the museum culture right now, that people are more open to thinking about rethinking how we run these institutions.
Well, and I think for myself as well, of course, as Indigenous people, we have a complicated history with museums. Just the whole cabinet of curiosities. For me, I know as an Indigenous person being in a museum, it's so that we can tell our stories from our voice, right? And I think it's so important for us to be here and reclaim that, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So moving a little bit from land to water, I know your newer work and more recent work has been really centered along water. So I'd really love for you to speak on your connection to water as an Indigenous woman and how it relates to your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been, over the last couple of years, I've been kind of more and more moving towards the water. And I've been able to kind of connect with women who are doing water walks and who are doing a lot of work around protecting the water. And I mean, I'll explain water walks a little bit. It's like there are Indigenous women all across Turtle Island who are starting and doing water walks almost every year. And one of the most well-known of them is Josephine Mandamin, who's from the Ontario area, and she's passed on. But she walked 17,000 kilometers around the Great Lakes to draw attention to water protection and to the sacredness of that land and water, and really trying to bring protection to those spaces. And so I just think that's so amazing and really important and poignant right now, I think, in where we are in our cultural moment, because everything is becoming more and more polluted, but also owned by certain interests and not all interests. And very often us as Indigenous people, especially people living on reserve, different spaces people don't have clean drinking water. People don't have clean drinking water, right? And I mean, this has always been an issue for so long. But again, it's an example of how the communities on reserve are paying for the decisions being made by others. And so it's really, really important that we kind of claim sovereignty and also like take responsibility for caring for the land and water. And I think that's something us as Indigenous women we're amazing at it. And because I see women doing it all the time, and I'm just amazed at what they can do, like walking 17,000 kilometers. And she was in probably her 80s when she passed on. So she just walked and walked to make sure that water was kept safe and understood as sacred. And she created a relationship with that water as she did that walking, because she was with it. She was physically with it. And so I'm very inspired by all these women doing this amazing work. And I feel like, spiritually, water it's where we come from, right? We come from the waters and our mothers, and women are the water carriers in a lot of cultures. And Anishinaabe spirituality, women are the water carriers. And that means we hold the responsibility of protecting and caring for the water. And it's also about healing. So for me, like in my practice, doing the work I do, kind of engaging with, a lot of trauma and creating these conversations around violence and colonialism and all the things that we all are kind of fighting against. It's important to remember like what we're fighting for. And for me, like being in the water is where I feel most at home. I love being in water. I will jump in lake anywhere, any lake. I was in Lake Superior this year. It was freezing, probably like 10 degrees. But my family's from that area as well, the Lake Superior area. And I was always on the water with my grandpa. So I kind of spent a lot of time with him. And he had a relationship with the water that, like, he didn't even talk about it, but he could read the water. He knew what it was going to be like. He knew it, like he just knew it intimately. And it was really beautiful to like be with him and watch that relationship he had with the water. And so, for all of those reasons, I'm just kind of thinking about like, water, going back to the water is like going back to healing, going back to the place we were like, it's kind of like it's almost like another world where all the weight of what we hold in that kind of material world sort of is taken off of us in the water, and we kind of go back to that place where we came from. That safe space of being in our mothers. And I'm kind of thinking about that when I'm making these works.
I'm just thinking about the slides here. There's one photograph where you're on the rock, and I'm assuming that's probably in the White Shell in Manitoba.
Yeah.
So was that by the Bannock petroforms, perhaps, or close by?
Let's talk about those.
Yeah.
It was it was very close to there. So Sylvia's speaking about there's actually a site just outside of Winnipeg, not too far, in the White Shell area, and it is a sacred area that people have been going to for thousands of years, and in the area are petroforms, and so they're shapes. They're basically the original art. So it's like, the drawings, the paintings on the rock, and the carvings in the rock, and the petroforms are actually stones placed in the shapes of different animals, people. There's a thunderbird rock formation, there's a turtle rock formation, and there's many, many others. So those are just like the original art and the original teachings. And elders I've worked with in that area call it our university as Anishinaabe people, right? Like we go there to learn our stories, and those rocks were placed in those formations and made in that way so long ago that they're carrying that knowledge from so long ago, and it's something we need really bad right now because, you know, everything has conspired to erase that knowledge. And so it's a really, really powerful space to be in. And we're also working on trying to protect that space because it is not adequately protected from tourists and other people who come through and will move things. And the women I work with have said that there's just been damage to those petroforms, and you know, people don't really understand what the power behind those. And so, you know, we go back there for ceremony, we go back there to learn stories, and we go back there to reconnect to knowledge that's really, really old that will help us in moving forward now. So yeah, so this image we're looking at right now, I cannot remember what I named it. They make me name everything and I always forget. But yeah, I was kind of thinking about that like the knowledge that the land holds. And I know I keep talking about that, but I really, you know, like they talk about water holding memory, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that everything holds memory. Like all, like the trees hold memory, and you know, I think about a tree and it's like been standing in the same spot for 50 years. Like, what would you learn if you stood in the same spot for 100 years? Like how much you would know, right? Like just watching and seeing what happens. And so, you know, I think about this rock, and that rock was here way before even we were as humans, right? So it's like the bones of the earth almost. It's holding that memory of who we were before colonization came. It knows that. The rock knows that. The water knows that. They remember that, and they sit in that knowledge, and they don't get swayed by all this human stuff that's going on, right? And so to reconnect with that is really centering and grounding, and it helps to balance out and kind of get better perspective on what we're going through here, like through all the struggle and violence that we're going through. You know, like I always tell people when I try to be hopeful sounding that, you know, colonization on the grand scheme of like the timeline of humanity is actually quite a small bit of time, right? And I mean, we're in it, and I don't want to ever erase the horror and the trauma that we've gone through because of that. But we lived in balance with everything around us for tens of thousands of years before that, right? And so I think we also all carry that memory of how to live that way, like how to live in balance, in respect with the land around us, the water, the animals, each other. And I think we know that, and we have that in us, and we can, I believe we can return to it. We can return to that knowledge and learn from how we were, and learn from the land and we carry that in us.
I know we already spoke a little bit, of course, about Grandma Josephine, but I'd like you to speak a little bit more about Indigenous matriarchy and what that really means to you and how that informs your work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up thinking matriarchy didn't exist. I had never heard of it before. You know, nobody talks about it. And so I only learned probably like through doing my work as an artist, I've learned all the things that I know I've learned so much. Meeting people and meeting elders and working with women often, like in, you know, who are like Indigenous historians or Métis historians and professors and grandmothers and whatever. And so I've gathered this knowledge by creating this artwork, and it's taken me on this journey. So it was probably only like through doing this work that I learned that many Indigenous communities across Turtle Island were matriarchal. And that was just like a light bulb, like, oh my goodness, of course. Like there are other ways of being. There are other ways of being in the world than the one we're stuck in right now. it's not the only way. And to me, it's really hopeful, and it's personal too, because it's like we, you know, we are encouraged to be quiet, to, you know, as women, right? Like, and so to remember that actually we are from lines of matriarchs is really powerful knowledge. And I think that both Indigenous and non-Indigenous women held those roles, you know, before. I don't really know history super well in Europe, but you know, there was a time when people in Europe also had earth-based religions, and I would guess that those probably gave birth to matriarchies as well. And so, you know, we hold that, you know, the knowledge of those systems in our bones still, and it's a possibility. It's a possibility in a you know, doorway hopefully we can walk through again as women, and reclaim that strength and power and voice that we, you know, we deserve and always had, and it's still there. And so it's really about awakening that, like, in myself, because, you know, as we all do, like, it's never perfect in this kind of systems that we're in. It's really tricky to, like, build that confidence in yourself, or to speak up when you feel like you can't, or you know, all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I feel like doing this work has really helped me, and I'm not fixed. I wouldn't say that I'm fixed, or that I live outside of these systems, or that I'm perfect either, but just really given me something strong to hold on to. Yeah.
So of course your work is often considered politically charged. Do you feel as an Indigenous artist, we are intrinsically political within our work, just being Indigenous in our artistic practice? Or maybe how you feel about that for your own practice. I shouldn't ask you to speak on everybody, but.
Everything becomes political in that, like, the body is political, right? Everything's politicized. And like, I mean, I would like to pretend / I would like to be outside of that and work outside of that, because I think we're always trying to escape those systems that are trying to categorize us and push us in different directions and say what, you know, what is acceptable and not acceptable, and just express what we need to express, and not have that, you know, necessarily politicized. But yeah, I mean, I just think that just our very existence as women, our very existence as Indigenous women, yeah, it becomes political. But I think that also, I try to not, I don't know how to put it. Yeah, I try to keep some space between myself and that, because I feel like that's a colonial system that's politicizing everything. That's not my system. That's not how I want to do things. And even though the work does kind of like become this political sort of like hot topic or whatever, that's not the heart of it. And that's not where it's coming from. It's not coming from that place. And it's coming from relearning who I am and helping other people relearn who they are. And it's coming from the heart, and it's not coming from a political place. It's just, I mean, why is taking care of the land political?
Yeah.
Why is making sure we're safe and not hurt political?
Right.
Like, you know, that should be a given. It shouldn't be political.
Well, and I think when we think about our water and the way we are defenders of the water, I know right before COVID happened in 2019, we had, of course, a lot of shutdowns of transport systems out here in the East.
Yes.
And all across Canada. And it's interesting when I think about that, is that, you know, all of us need water, not just us as Indigenous people. We all do, right? And so I always think it's interesting that why isn't everybody as concerned as we are, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of, yeah, that's what I'm also like sort of you just made me think of that, like oil and water sort of performance as well. It's like we all need to start standing together. Like we all need water. We shouldn't have to pay like $9 a bottle of water. And I feel like, I mean, I think that somehow we've been sort of on the fringes, and so we see where things are lacking somehow or something. And but like, you know, if you live in luxury, you don't notice that there's no water until there's really no water, right? Whereas communities are like, hey, they poisoned this water in our backyard and now we can't drink it. We haven't drank water out of the tap for 30 years.
Yeah.
That then, like, the reality of what happens when we don't take care of our water is there, right? But we all need to, we all need to be able to, you know, stand and show respect and care for the land and water.
Yeah, and I think everyone should try to do a 4-day vision quest where you're fasting, where you really, really understand the importance of water during the 4 days.
I haven't even done that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go into this last slide here. Because I hadn't actually seen that work before. That's just the next one. With the could you talk a little bit about this? I've never really seen this photograph before, so it's
it's new stuff. So the last one that you don't have to switch the slide, but the last one, that's myself in the water. So I'm wanting to do some underwater actual like photos underwater, like doing things underwater. So this is just like, I think it was this summer actually. So that's why you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, so we went out to the water, and this summer it was, you know, it was the worst drought in I don't know how long. And it was really scary. And actually, like this day that we're out there, that's smoke. It's late in the day in this photo. And so I wanted to take some shots and try some things out. And I mean, I often do things really intuitively and then kind of look back on them, and they'll become teachers and teach me things, and there will be messages in the work, right? And so we just kind of went out there, and I wanted to just interact with the water and be there and just show some care and respect and create that relationship and just be in that space and see where it kind of took me. And I brought this like red ribbon with me, which there's a few photos of that red ribbon. And I kind of think of that as like our bloodline, or like the water as, you know, they talk about the veins, you know, the rivers being the veins of the land, right? Yeah. So it's that connection, it's that real connection between our bodies and the land as a body, right? Like it's a body of water, and how we are intimately connected with that. And so I guess that red ribbon sort of like symbolizes that connection between ourselves and the water. And so I brought that ribbon out there and just kind of did a few things with it. I, you know, kind of held it in prayer, and then pulled it slowly down into, like, from the land into the water. And there's a longer video actually
great.
of all of this. And it's really nice. Like I started out on the shore, and then walked out to the water, and then pull the ribbon all the way out to the water, and then I went into the water. So it's kind of like a sequence of going from the land to the water and like making that interconnection.
Yeah, it's really visually stunning. Really excited to see the video whenever that's finished.
So funny. I feel like we're just chatting, me and you. This is nice.
So Jamie, what's next? What is coming up for you as we're ending our hour here?
Well, I probably should say that the red dress is now traveling quite a bit in the States. And so it's been, it's being exhibited at different universities and colleges in the United States right now. One of them is Brandeis University, St. Kate's University, and so many places. But anyways, it's really exciting. And I feel like, you know, I'm starting to feel like the work was becoming sort of redundant here because the truth was told, and like I feel like people know on a larger scale now. And so I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe we're winding down with the red dresses, but in fact what has happened is they have transformed and they've sort of become the red dresses are on the front lines of so many environmental, like land protection movements. And in the States, it's like they're just starting the conversation, because in those spaces, the conversation kind of hasn't quite started on a broad public level yet. And so they're really doing that work now in the States. So it's really exciting to see that. So I'm working on that, and I might be doing a book. God, everybody's listening. Can't tell you everything.
No, of course. But I'd be really curious to know, in a couple of months' time, how the impact of the red dresses, or what the impact is in the States of the red dresses, because of course, even though our cultures are similar, it's a very different political and social climate there for Indigenous people, right? So I think there's even more outcry as of recent, with some Indigenous women going missing, and then some non-Indigenous women who have gone missing, where there's a lot more coverage of these women. So I think they're finding their voice right now as well. So I think it's a really perfect timing for that to be starting to open up that conversation and dialogue with people.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels really exciting that's kind of, I feel like I don't have any control over this. It's happening the way it's supposed to happen, I think, and it's really powerful, and I'm really glad to see those dresses kind of doing their work in different spaces now.
Well, we're coming to the top of the hour. So it looks like we've actually received some really great questions here.
Awesome.
And once again, just to remind our audience today that if you want to submit a question, just use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. So I will start with the first question. So it says, what are some steps we can all take to raise awareness about missing and murdered Indigenous women? Can you think of any concrete steps all Canadians can take?
Yeah, I think that creating relationships within Indigenous spaces is really important, and also allowing space for Indigenous people to lead. So I think that offering support, like I said, there's water walks going on, there's community things happening, there's groups of people working everywhere to make change in these systems. So I think it would be about making relationships with those people and asking them what they need. What support do they need? What do they see happening? Maybe that means, I know that right now here in Winnipeg, there has been a sacred fire lit at the, is it Parliament or, oh, I don't know. Anyways, at the government grounds at the legislature. That's what I'm trying to say. Goodness. But yeah, there's been a sacred fire lit there, and there's a grandmother watching that fire, and there's a group of community people there, and she's holding that fire for all the children that they're kind of unearthing across Canada. And so she's holding that fire and holding that space for those spirits of those children. And she started that sacred fire that's been burning in like May, whenever that all started. So she is there on the grounds of that space, holding that sacred fire. And so there are spaces like that where people are always doing community work, and they need, I don't know, sometimes they need wood, sometimes they need someone to watch the fire overnight, sometimes they need just like a couple cases of water, like because there's no water there, or supplies or things like that. So I think that building relationships is the first step, and making connections. And then really like kind of stepping out of the way, but just kind of being on the outskirts, like supporting and helping where you can, and allowing allowing others to take the, Indigenous people to take the lead on how they see their own healing happening. And that's really important. And but it doesn't mean we don't all need each other. And yeah, so I think that's sort of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I also think, just of course with June and Kamloops, it's really woken up our nation to some of the injustices that we have faced historically. And I know for myself, just from the people that I'm surrounded with, I've had definitely a lot more conversations about it, which are not always easy, but sometimes essential to have. And it is time to start talking about it, and it's time to be honest. And I think people are. I mean, I've been really happy to see how many allies that we have that are non-Indigenous, just with Canada Day and September 30th walks across the nation.
Yeah.
And it's really empowering to see that we have so many allies that are joining us and are there in solidarity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just like, it's the beginning of something. And I think, like I said, it's building relationships, right? And that's the first step. So like, join us. We're standing up for water. We're standing up for our women. We're standing up for we're really standing up for spaces that are safer and more humane and more kind for everyone. And so it's really not, it's really something that can benefit us all if we stand together, I think.
So the next question I have here, it says, you discussed your collaboration in displaying your artwork at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Can you discuss how you established a relationship with the museum, and what role do you think museums can play in telling the perspectives of missing and murdered Indigenous women?
Yeah, well, actually the museum came to me. So that's actually happened quite a lot. I was doing this work with the red dresses, people are coming to me. So it wasn't something I went out and sought out. And I actually did think about whether it was a good idea to put those dresses in that space. And I ultimately decided that yes, it was important for, the public to witness the dresses and be connected to that work and understand what was going on, because there was just, at the time, there was not enough public knowledge about what was going on. And so, and I mean, there's so many issues with museums, like, as I mentioned, but I think it's really important that, our voices are in there, right? So like, being able to put the red dresses in there meant being able to reclaim space in that institution for our voices and as Indigenous women. And, you might think of those dresses as being empty, but they're also a super powerful spiritual presence, and that cannot be denied. And I really feel like that having that energy in those spaces, and also being able to be the one, we are the ones telling that story. It's not the museum telling the story about us. And I think that's the powerful thing about putting those in that space. And so, but definitely, it's important to think about sort of like the ethics of like, how do we care for these works of art we create? How do we care for this spiritual energy we're kind of like working with as artists? How do we show it best? How do we share it best? And how do we take responsibility for that? I think that's really important. And so not every opportunity is the right fit, because sometimes it's not genuine, right? And so like, what does it look like? What are those spaces actually doing to create more and more room for Indigenous voices? What does that look like? And make sure that or try to, I don't know, in ways that we can, bring that to people's attention, that those spaces need to be, including our voices.
And I also think museums have such a big responsibility and a very difficult task at curating difficult knowledge. such as residential schools, such as missing and murdered.
Yeah.
It's curating trauma, essentially, in many ways, right? So I think museums, we are starting to listen to the voices and making sure that everyone is in these spaces that are safe and being able to make it accessible to everybody as well, but still being able to confront these histories, right?
It's an enormous task.
Yes.
Actually, it's an enormous task. And I mean, I'm sure it's the same where you are, Sylvia, working where you are right now at the museum, but especially also, I feel like the Human Rights Museum specifically is like, it's just like, how do we represent, all the viewpoints we need to represent? How do we do this in the best way possible? And it can be a real minefield, but it's important that those stories are told. So we need to.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Really great questions tonight, by the way. Thank you, everybody. How can we take steps in building stronger relationships with water? And how can we care and protect water? Also, do you feel that the relationship is gendered? And is it easier for women to connect than men?
Well, like I said in Anishinaabe teachings, it's the women that are water carriers, and there's actually like a lot of teachings are gendered. I don't necessarily stand for or against any of them myself. Like I feel like I kind of approach them with care and respect, but don't necessarily feel like I need to plunk myself in one side or the other. And I think that we are all obviously connected to water because we are made of water. Our bodies are made of water, right? And like we need water to live. So, just I think maybe because of certain biological things, women might have like some more connection to that. I don't know. It's kind of up to us all to make that decision if that's what we kind of ascribe to. But yeah, like we all are connected to the water. And I mean, I guess again, like, I mean, I make art about things. I mean, we all kind of like interact and can sort of make connections with these things in our own ways. And so I wouldn't really be able to like prescribe a way that you can make a connection with water. But I think it's like, it's an intentionality, and it's and I keep saying care over and over and over again in this talk, because I think it's really important. It's like, how do we take care of the water? The water takes care of us.
Mm-hmm.
How do we take care of the water? Right? And it's like asking ourselves that question. I'm not saying even I'm like, what, I take pictures of it? Like, so what, right? Like, like what can we do, right? And so we need to, I think, first think about that relationship and think of it as a relationship, that it's a living being. How do we give that care back that we're getting from the water? And it starts from that, I think, from the heart in that space. And then, I mean, maybe end up, I don't know, going to marches around protecting water, or I don't know, maybe you're making art too, or maybe you're, everybody has their own kind of skill set that they can kind of, maybe you're a lawyer and you start, taking cases around water rights. I don't know. So that's sort of up to you, but I think it just begins with that relationship and that reciprocity between yourself and the land and the water.
All right. So there's another question here. It says, thank you for sharing with us tonight. I'm very interested to know the range of emotions you feel while creating your pieces, especially your performative pieces. Do you ultimately find it healing, or is it quite emotionally taxing?
That's such a beautiful question. Thank you for
someone
in the void for asking that. That's nice. Because yes, this is like a highly emotional journey to be on, doing all of this work. And I mean, it's really the gamut. Like it's very intense emotions, and sometimes it's really amazing. Like just like goosebumps amazing, like when you just like hit the right note in a song or something, it's just like, and it's so powerful, and I feel like I'm right in the exact place I'm meant to be. And that's just like, there's nothing like that. And, but there's also, I feel like to get to that, what I was just talking about, you got to go through the guck and the dark and the hard and the scary. Like, that's how you get that deep, you know. That's where the beautiful things are on the other side of that sometimes. And so I think it's just like it's just like accepting, or somehow being able to accept all of those different emotions that come with doing that kind of work.
Well, it's spirit too, right? It's like igniting that spirit within.
Yeah.
That's how I see it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's power, right? And like, I think to get that strength, you need to be able to break.
Well, they say the only way out is through, right? So, yeah.
Exactly.
So the next question here. Do you have hope that the impacts of colonization will diminish as Indigenous peoples develop closer relationships to land? That's a good question.
Sylvia, I'm so sorry, but I got like so emotional that my brain stopped working. So can you just repeat that question one more time?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you have hope that the impacts of colonization will diminish as Indigenous peoples develop closer relationships to land?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I was super inspired. I don't know if you all know Isaac Murdoch and Christy Belcourt, but I was very, very inspired by what they did. And they actually created a culture camp. And it's actually a place where they live now. And they do everything, well, not everything. It's not totally like, you know, perfect, whatever, but they're on the land like they used to be, and they are on their traditional territory, and they reclaimed their traditional territory. And their goal is to learn the language, to bring the art back, to learn, to, you know, relearn those skills of being on the land. And it's really, really inspiring. And
they're tanning moose right now, as from what I recall.
are they?
Which is really neat, and it's all woman-led as well. Moose high tanning.
That is so cool. Yeah, and they're doing like art-based work and you know, learning the stories, traditional knowledge, all of that stuff. And so I had a chance to go there, and it felt amazing. And I think there's just really something powerful about reconnecting to that kind of knowledge. And I think that the more that we can help, you know, the younger generations connect to that knowledge, the stronger we're going to be. And, you know, I think also it like offers another way forward, another way. It offers us an alternative, because I think that like we as Indigenous people, but also kind of the larger society, doesn't think there's any other way than the way we're doing things right now. They don't think there's any other way. And I think that like learning these knowledges, connecting with these knowledges proves, yes, there are other ways. There are alternatives to, you know, patriarchy and capitalism and all of these things that are actually harming humanity and the land. There are other ways of doing it. And so I think relearning that will definitely make an impact.
So what words of advice would you give women to help them speak out, to advocate for their rights in a predominantly patriarchal society?
Oh, that's so tricky. I just want to say that to whoever asked that question, I don't always speak out when I should speak out. I try to. I know how dangerous that can be to speak out. I know that a lot of people put themselves in harm's way if they speak out directly to people. So I think that, like, from my perspective, creating this art was a way for us to speak out without directly addressing people who are harming us, right? So that's a really, really tricky one. And I actually hesitate to give advice on it because I don't know specific people's situation. And I think that it's like really important that we take our own safety into consideration first before anything. And that's really important. And and speak out in the ways that we can. Maybe we're writing poetry, or maybe we're sharing with friends, or maybe we're forming a group of women where we can talk through these things. Those sorts of actions really help us and provide support and an outlet to speak out in the way that we can.
Do you think we would have current environmental concerns, such as global warming, if we were predominantly a matriarchal society? And how do we make men connect more with the environment?
First question, no. So funny. Yeah, I mean, of course I'm going to make a whole bunch of men mad now, but I think like the important thing about matriarchy to understand is that I think a lot of people think that means that women are in charge.
Yeah.
That's not how that works, really. Like, we don't, like, I mean, and I'm not saying there aren't women that don't want power over people, sure, like not everybody's perfect, but I think the system of matriarchy itself is based on valuing people and humans and family and life and the land and the water more than anything else, and living in balance with those systems. That's what matriarchy actually means. It doesn't mean women tell everybody what to do all day. That's not the thing. That's not what it's about. So I think, in that way, matriarchy actually could help all of us, not just women. I don't know if I answered the question. I just went on a rant. What was the last part of it?
It's how do we make men connect more with the environment?
Oh, yeah. Geez, I don't know. I'm not a man, so
yeah.
I don't really know if I can give advice to men about what men should do. But I think there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think that I really applaud people who are taking that journey and really kind of digging deeper and like looking at the systems that have oppressed, like men have also been oppressed, and like probably no one wants to hear that, or no one thinks that, whatever. But there are, I mean, men get more benefits from this system, but they still have to mold themselves in a certain way that's painful to them in order to succeed in the system. So it's we're all hurting because of these systems. So it's not just women, although it is definitely harder for groups of people, right? It's kind of on a continuum. So I think there is healing and sort of like a reckoning and a looking at these systems that men need to do as well as women.
So changing a bit of speed here, this is a great question as well. What is your favorite art piece that you've created? Yes, if you could pick one.
I have such a bad memory. I just like makes a bunch of stuff.
There's a question that goes with that as well. What is your most challenging, your favorite or challenging art piece that you've created?
Interesting. I would say that all the performance work I've done and the red dresses were all challenging, definitely very challenging. And I mean, I don't think I could pick a favorite, because it's like my son always asks me, he's 8, he says, "What's your favorite song?" And I'm like, that's a crazy question. I know probably thousands and thousands of songs. How could
That's a very hard
question. How could I possibly pick one song? Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a tricky question to answer. I feel like this work is sort of like a journey, and it's really interconnected. And so there's not one thing that's sort of I mean, obviously the red dresses stand out in a way and had a profound effect on me and everyone around me in ways I never would have imagined. But that doesn't mean it's my favorite necessarily. But it's, it's all interconnected, and it all teaches me different things. So.
Okay. Let's see so we'll just end off with this last question here. What is one final message you would like everyone listening to take away from tonight?
Oh my goodness, that's a tall order. Oh my God, what is it? I don't know. I think that, yeah, I think like throughout this talk, I have mentioned care a lot, and I'm mentioning it again. But I think that like kindness and care for the land, for the water, for each other is like the base from which we can actually make change. And I think if we cannot, like, I feel like we need to get there first, to that space of caring for each other and being interdependent, not dependent, not codependent, interdependent, and like just working in this way that we really care about each other again. Because I think we live in a culture where we're competitive, we're individualistic, and we're isolated, and it creates divisions between us. And I see that happening more and more and more over through this COVID thing. And I'm feeling it more and more. And it's like this animosity and this fear of other people and this disconnection from each other and this breakdown of community. And I think we need to work against that and show care and show compassion and show solidarity with each other and reconnect as a community for our very survival, like all of us. So I think I want to leave you guys with that.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing not only your practice, but your knowledge with us tonight. It was a real treat to be able to have this conversation with you, catching up in the meantime. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight here at the museum. And this will be available online in a couple of days on the Canadian Museum of History's website. So you can, if you had friends that couldn't watch it, it will be available very soon. Thanks again. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Sylvia. See ya.